Chad Walker stood still beneath the gray sky, the folded flag trembling in his hands, not from the cold, but from the weight of something no one could name. You were there too, weren't you? Watching from the third row back, beside the oak tree where the funeral speaker's microphone kept crackling like it couldn't bear to tell the truth. You saw the coffin, you saw the medals, you saw the widow's hand gripping her son's jacket like if she let go he'd disappear too. But what you didn't see, what no one saw, was the exact moment when the man in the dress blues whispered something into the dead general's casket, then vanished like a breath swallowed by the wind. That man, that wasn't a soldier, that wasn't even someone listed on the official invite roster. And yet, there he was, standing at attention, uniform crisp, eyes empty. No one blinked when he stepped forward, but after he leaned in, after his lips barely moved, he was gone. Like he'd never been there. You felt it. The air shifted, even the birds went quiet. One moment, present. The next, not. And the only person who seemed to notice was Chad, whose face turned so pale he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't say a word until later that night, and when he did, he made a phone call that changed everything. A call to internal affairs. A call that ended with him accusing Officer Daniel Rourke, the same man who gave the eulogy, for threatening a U.S. military general at his own funeral. The general, who'd been buried with honors that morning. But how do you threaten a dead man? How do you get sentenced to life for a crime no one can prove ever happened? The transcript of the trial was sealed. The courtroom sketch was confiscated mid-broadcast. News outlets pulled the story within hours, like it was radioactive. No mugshot, no headline, no hashtag, just whispers, like the kind that seep into your dreams where you're walking through your childhood home but all the furniture is rearranged, and your mother's voice is calling you from behind the wall. That kind of wrong. Chad hasn't been seen since the verdict. Not officially. But there's a photo, grainy, out of focus, circulating in an encrypted military chat forum. You can barely make out his face. He's standing outside an abandoned VA hospital in Alabama, eyes wide, mouth open, frozen mid-sentence. The caption reads, "He said the general's not dead. He said the casket was empty." And in the corner, just barely visible in the reflection of the broken glass door, someone else is standing there, wearing a dress uniform, saluting, smiling. And that's when the messages started, from numbers that don't exist, from accounts with no names, all asking the same question, one no one's dared to speak aloud. Duko, you remember what he whispered? Because maybe, just maybe, you heard it too. And if you did, you're already next. The message came at 2:41 a.m. timestamped in red. No sender, no subject, just a file attachment labeled Audio 1001 Wave. Chad shouldn't have opened it, but when you're alone and the hallway light keeps flickering for no reason, and you swear you heard footsteps behind the drywall of your own home, curiosity stops being a choice. It becomes something you owe to the silence. He clicked play. At first, it was nothing. Just static, the kind you get when the TV's been left on a dead channel, humming in that low-frequency hum that always makes you feel like you're not alone in the room. Then came the breath, long, dragging, like it had crawled up from the basement of someone's throat. And then, the whisper. The casket was never for him. The voice wasn't his own, but it knew him. It spoke with the cadence of someone who'd read his memories like files in a locked drawer. It was flat, not angry, not pleading, but final. And that was somehow worse. Chad stopped the recording, sat there in the glow of the monitor, listened to the house hum and creak. The ceiling fan rotated just slightly off rhythm. It had never done that before. But then, here's where it breaks. He replayed the file 5 minutes later. This time, the whisper changed. You were never meant to see the second coffin. He scrubbed back, rewound, played it again. The whisper, different again. Where were you really during the eulogy? And that was the moment he realized he didn't remember the speech, the eulogy, nothing. He remembered Daniel Rourke, standing there, yes. Remembered the oak tree, the widow, the casket draped in flags. But the words, not a single one, not even the rhythm of them. Just an image burned in his head. Rourke gripping the podium, staring straight ahead, as if listening, not speaking. So, Chad did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He called Kate Morrison. Kate was a journalist once, before she disappeared for a year and came back saying nothing, just grew quiet and slow and kept 3 locks on her bedroom door. They were close once. Not lovers, not quite friends either. But they'd both seen something in Afghanistan that never made it to the after-action report. Something about a bunker that didn't exist, and a man in a uniform from the 1940s who kept showing up in their drone footage, but only for a frame. One single frame. Kate didn't say hello when she picked up, she just said, "It's happening again, isn't it?" Chad froze. He hadn't said a word. She continued, "I got one too. Audio file. Different whisper though. Mine said, 'You signed something you don't remember.'" Chad asked her what it meant. She said she didn't know, then said, "But I keep dreaming about a building with no doors." They met the next day at a diner on Route 9. The coffee was too hot. The music playing overhead glitched every 13 seconds. Same song restart. No one else in the diner seemed to notice. Not the trucker in the corner, not the waitress with the fake smile and the bruise under her sleeve. Just Chad and Kate, sitting across from each other like survivors of a fire no one else saw. She slid a flash drive across the table, downloaded all the files off my phone before it wiped itself. She didn't look up. I didn't delete them, it just did. Everything from the last month gone. Except these. Chad didn't ask if she was okay. He could see she wasn't. Her eyes kept twitching toward the door, like she was waiting for someone to come in and finish the sentence she was too scared to start. That night, Chad played one of her recordings. This one was different. At first, silence. Then the sound of a child's voice, garbled like it was underwater, saying a name, his name. Then laughter. But not a child's. Laughter deeper than anything human. Laughter that felt too close. He shut it off, popped the flash drive out, tried to breathe, tried to tell himself this was trauma. That maybe the funeral, the trial, the whisper, maybe it all triggered something in him, in them. Some hidden fault line cracking open. But then the news broke. Daniel Rourke had escaped custody. Except that's not what the articles said. Each one, every outlet, every headline, read like a copy and paste error from a script someone higher. Handed down. They said, no record of arrest, no charges filed, no such trial scheduled. But Chad remembered sitting in the back of the courtroom. He remembered the click of the judge's gavel. He remembered the way the lights flickered when the sentence was read. Kate called again. This time in the middle of the day. She sounded different, like someone else was standing beside her. She said she found something worse than the whisper. A video. It showed a funeral. Same date, same location, same coffin, but not the same people. Chad wasn't in it, the widow wasn't there. The man at the podium wasn't Rourke. It was a priest with a face that shimmered like a bad reflection, and in the background, just barely visible behind the oak tree, was Chad. Standing, watching, unmoving, unblinking, but he had no memory of being filmed. He asked Kate to send him the footage. She refused. Then she said, "You shouldn't be asking questions like that." "Not anymore." Then she hung up. 3 hours later, her apartment burned down. No signs of accelerant, no electrical issues. Her laptop was recovered, but the drive had been scrubbed, zeroed out, factory reset. Her body was never found. The news didn't cover. Because the news doesn't cover things like this. Things that don't fit. Things that make you start to question what memory really is, and whether the version of yourself walking through your day is actually you, or just the echo of someone else's choices. And then came the second whisper. This one not on a file. Not on a screen, it came through his bedroom wall. There was never a general, only the coffin. He didn't sleep after that. He didn't eat. He started pulling records, public service logs, cemetery maps, official transcripts. Every trace of the funeral was gone. Even the VA denied the general's name. No one by that name had ever served. The widow's address led to an empty plot of land, fenced off and humming. Actually humming. He got a knock on his door yesterday, man in uniform, same one from the funeral, clean-shaven, too still. He didn't say anything, just handed Chad a sealed envelope, saluted, and walked off without turning around. Inside the envelope, a single photograph, blurry, grainy, a second coffin, identical, same flag, same flowers, but no nameplate. On the back of the photo, written in a child's handwriting, "One was meant to bury you." Chad hasn't left his house in 2 days, not because he's afraid of what's outside, but because the second coffin is in his attic, and he can hear something breathing inside it. Chad sat on the creaking floor of his attic, the faint hum of the second coffin beneath the loose floorboards like a pulse syncing with his own heartbeat. The envelope's photograph lay beside him, its grainy edges smudged with the sweat of his shaking hands. The air smelled stale but carried an unshakable weight, as if every breath he took was drawing in fragments of a forgotten past, fragments that had been buried so deep that even his mind fought to reject them. Then, in a sudden blur of clarity, a door cracked open inside his memories. He saw the funeral again, but this time with sharper edges, clearer faces. A file folder slipped from the funeral program, a name written in typeface he recognized. General Thomas Sinclair. It was real. He remembered now. He had been there. The widow's eyes wet with tears that morning, the soldier's crisp salutes, the officer at the podium, Daniel Rourke, shaking as he spoke a warning no one heard. Shiu. Truth was there, just beneath the surface of his fractured mind. The memories he'd lost, the audio files that twisted and changed, the vanishing man. It all made sense if only he accepted the simplest answer. Rourke had been trying to protect something buried beneath the polished veneer of ceremony and honor. Chad found the local archives and, trembling, pulled the faded obituary of Thomas Sinclair. It matched. It was all there. His name, his service, his funeral. A solid rock of truth to cling to. Relief washed over him, a balm against the gnawing fear. He thought the mystery was solved. The whispering voices, the flickering lights, the vanishing figures. They were cracks in his mind from stress, trauma, the aftermath of what he'd seen in Afghanistan blending with the emotional turmoil of the trial. A memory glitch. He wasn't crazy. They lied to him. They wanted him to question, to doubt, to disappear into silence. But the truth, his truth, was out there, and he was holding it now. That night he fell asleep feeling almost whole. But the comfort was short-lived. When he awoke, the attic was cold in a way that no heater could fix, and the second coffin sat open, a dark void yawning where a body should have been. His skin prickled as the air thickened with an oppressive presence. The hum from the coffin was no longer mechanical. It felt alive, watching. He heard a voice, not whispered but spoken aloud, distant yet unmistakable. "You remember too much," he recoiled. The phrase echoed in the corridors of his mind, pulling him toward something buried deeper than Sinclair's funeral, deeper than Rourke's threats. The memory surfaced then, a flash of a hospital room 2 decades ago, his mother's. Pale face, eyes glazed over and staring beyond him, words she spoke that made no sense. They're watching. They're always watching. He'd buried that memory alongside the photo album of his childhood, but it was clawing back now with terrible urgency. The lines between past and present blurred until he wasn't sure if he was remembering or reliving. Searching his phone, Chad found an old voice memo from his mother, recorded before she died. His fingers trembled as he played it. The crackling voice whispered a warning. "They rewrite what you see, make you doubt the past, but the story is in the silence you don't hear." Then his phone shut off on its own. Screen black. No matter how many times he pressed the power button, it stayed dead. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it a smell he couldn't place, like wet earth and iron, and a faint static that slowly grew louder, almost like breathing or a heartbeat not his own. Chad thought he was alone, but a shadow shifted in the corner of the room. Just for a moment. The next morning, the local sheriff arrived unannounced. Not the man's usual calm presence, but cold, clipped, eyes too sharp for a small-town cop. "We've been looking into your case," he said, voice low. "And there are things you don't understand, things we can't explain." He pulled out a thin folder, slipped it onto the table. Inside, grainy photographs. The funeral. The second coffin. A group of uniformed men surrounding it. Faces obscured, but eyes glowing faintly. Too bright to be human. The sheriff's gaze bore into Chad's. "You're not crazy," he said, "but they've been watching you for a long time. Not just now. Not just at the funeral." His hand tapped the photos again. "They want you to forget what you saw that day, but you didn't." Before Chad could respond, the sheriff's phone rang. He answered, then paused, his face paling. "We've, got another one," he whispered more to himself than Chad. Another voice, another name whispered, "And they're coming back." Chad's chest tightened. It was happening again. But something worse was unraveling. His memories no longer felt like his own. Faces from his childhood appeared distorted. In family photos, words slipped through his mind like water, impossible to grasp. The feeling that his past was being rewritten, one erased moment at a time, crept through him like ice. He looked back at the photograph of the second coffin, then at the empty coffin beneath the floorboards. The truth he thought he'd uncovered was just another layer of the labyrinth, a false resolution designed to draw him deeper. The whisper from the shadows wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. The presence watching him was no stranger to fear. It was ancient, patient, and intimately bound to the fragments of his own memory, feeding off his doubt, growing stronger with every unanswered question. And then Chad noticed it. A tiny detail in the photograph that made his blood run cold. Behind, the blurred figures, half hidden beneath a draped American flag, a faint emblem shimmered, one he had seen before but never understood. It was the same symbol tattooed faintly on the wrist of Daniel Rourke, the man sentenced for a crime that might never have happened. A symbol tied to something far older than the funeral, something that was never meant to be found. In that instant, the story collapsed in on itself, the lines between reality and nightmare fracturing so violently that Chad's world spun into darkness. He wasn't just a witness anymore. He was a part of the mystery. And the mystery was watching him back. The way past was not just broken. It was rewriting itself. And this time, the truth wasn't waiting at the end of the story. It was waiting at the beginning, waiting for you to see it again, to remember. Because maybe, just maybe, you've been here all along, and you missed it. There's a weight to silence that nobody talks about, a silence heavy enough to press the breath from your lungs, yet subtle enough to cloak itself in the everyday noise of a world that's moved on without you. Chad thought he was alone in this fractured nightmare, the only soul trapped in a loop where memories bled into shadows, where truth twisted like smoke slipping through fingers. But he wasn't. Somewhere out there, across towns and states, behind locked doors and beneath peeling wallpaper, others were living the same unspoken torment, unseen, unheard, but undeniably connected. Their stories, like his, were fragments of a puzzle that didn't want to be solved. They were watching, too, silent witnesses to a larger force that spun its web far beyond what anyone dared imagine. It started with the messages, cryptic, almost, imperceptible, slipping into Chad's world like a ghost's breath on a window pane. The first was a scribbled note pushed under his front door, the paper brittle, edges singed as if torn from some ancient ledger. On it, a simple symbol, a circle fractured by 3 jagged lines intersecting at impossible angles. A mark that stirred, something deep in Chad's gut, something familiar but buried beneath years of forgetting. Later, as he scrolled through his phone, a new voicemail appeared. No caller ID, just static and a whispered voice that said, "You're not alone. Watch for the signs. The message ended abruptly, the faintest hint of a melody lingering like a shadow he couldn't quite place. He played it over and over, the words sinking deeper, embedding like a seed in the dark soil of his mind. And then the dreams began, shared dreams, fragmented but impossibly collective. He found himself standing in a vast hall of mirrors, each reflection twisted, shifting, showing glimpses of other faces, faces he recognized from news clips, faces he saw in crowded streets but never truly noticed. Each dream ended the same way, a shadowy figure moving silently between reflections, tracing the fractured symbol on the glass with a finger that seemed to bleed light. When he woke, the symbol was burned into his eyelids, seared there by a memory he couldn't claim. It wasn't just Chad. Across anonymous forums buried deep within the internet's underbelly, fragmented conversations hinted at similar experiences, names he hadn't heard in years, names tied to lost files, found footage from 20 years ago that the government never released, videos of unexplained disappearances and strange signals intercepted by satellites long since decommissioned. These weren't random glitches or coincidence, they were coordinated, purposeful. The viewers, the witnesses, were all part of a quiet chorus chanting truths no one else wanted to hear. In the midst of this unraveling, a new voice emerged, raw, urgent, and impossibly real. It came through a cracked screen, shaky footage of a man known only as Elias, an observer who claimed to have been watching from the margins, piecing together the truth behind what no one tells you. His eyes were haunted, rimmed with exhaustion but unblinking. "You were right all along," Elias said in a voice heavy with the weight of things hidden too long. "They rewrite memories. They control what you think you saw, what you believe. But there's a thread, a pattern beneath the lies. You're part of it. We all are. And if you can see this, if you can hear me, then you've already crossed the line." Elias's footage was more than a warning. It was a map, a call to awareness that spread like wildfire through the isolated pockets of those caught in the same web. He spoke of experiments disguised as routine, of hidden codes embedded in public broadcasts, and of a force watching through layers of government secrecy and forgotten conspiracies. A presence that wasn't just external but internal, an invasive shadow that bent the very fabric of identity and memory. Chad watched the videos, feeling the walls of his reality tremble. Every word Elias spoke echoed a truth he had felt but never named, the idea that what made a person them was no longer their own. Memories, once anchors, were now weapons wielded by unseen hands. The faces in his dreams, the whispers in his phone, were they fragments of his own mind, or signals sent to manipulate, to control? In this twilight zone between sanity and nightmare, the lines blurred so much that Chad stopped trusting his own reflection in the mirror. He noticed changes, small, at first moments where his thoughts weren't his or when his hand moved without permission. The shadowy symbol began appearing everywhere, etched in frost on car windows, flickering briefly in television static, carved faintly into the bark of a tree outside his window. It was a language he was forced to learn, a code that tethered him to the others like a phantom chain. And then the unthinkable happened. He received a package with no return address. Inside was a worn notebook filled with scrawled pages, fragmented diaries of someone who had disappeared years before. The entries described the same symbol, the same manipulation of memory, and a chilling prophecy that those who uncovered the high truth would be hunted by something more terrifying than death, a force that didn't just erase bodies, but erased existence itself. As Chad flipped through the pages, the last entry caught his eye, a line repeated like a mantra. They watch through the eyes of the lost. They are patient. They are everywhere. The room darkened suddenly, as if the day had been swallowed whole, and the weight of unseen eyes pressed down on him. A chill seeped into his bones, a primal fear that wasn't about what he saw, but what he couldn't see. You think you've been watching from the outside, but the truth is far more disturbing. You've been inside this from the start, part of a larger story that bends reality, memory, and control. into a shape you can barely comprehend. And now, as the symbol glows faintly on your screen, as the whispers rise just beyond your hearing, you realize this isn't just Chad's story anymore. It's yours. And they've been waiting for you to see it all along. The truth is not always a revelation bathed in clarity and light. Sometimes it is a shadow you carry inside, a weight that burrows deeper the more you try to shake it off. Chad sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the room thick with silence, his breath the only sound slicing through the stillness. Outside, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the fracture unfolding inside a man who had spent too long chasing answers he never wanted. Tonight, the mystery had shifted. It was no longer about what had happened, no longer about symbols carved in frost or voices whispered on the wind. It was about why it had happened, about what it meant for the fragile core of what it meant to be human. He thought back to every fragmented memory, every stolen moment of clarity and madness, the vanishing figures, the cryptic messages, the shared dreams that had felt like lifelines and shackles all at once. They were threads in a tapestry far older and darker than he could have imagined. And at the heart of it all was a question he hadn't dared ask until now. Was this chaos, this distortion of memory and identity, a punishment or a gift? Was it the universe's cruel joke, or a desperate attempt to awaken something sleeping inside us all? The phone buzzed softly, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. It was Elias. The grainy footage flickered to life on the screen. But this time his eyes weren't just tired. They were raw with something deeper. "You're closer than you know," Elias said quietly, voice trembling as if the weight of confession crushed him in real time. "But it's not the memories that will save you. It's the choices you make when those memories bleed into the present." The screen went dark, leaving Chad alone with the echo of those words. And then the confession came, not from a stranger, but from within. The fear that clawed at his mind wasn't just about what he'd seen or forgotten. It was about what he had done or what he might have done. The shattered fragments of self pointed to a cruel possibility. Was he the architect of this nightmare? Had he been a pawn, a victim, or something far more dangerous? A participant in a cycle of erasure and rebirth that no one outside this hidden world could understand? The revelation tore at him, exposing a raw nerve of vulnerability. The line between predator and prey blurred until they were indistinguishable. Chad realized then that the force watching, manipulating, and rewriting was not some distant cold entity. It was a reflection of the chaos inside every human soul. The hunger for control, the fear of loss, the desperate grasp for meaning in a universe that offered none. This force was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat, as ingrained as the memories he could no longer trust. The mystery was a mirror, revealing humanity's darkest truth, that our identities are fragile constructions, always vulnerable to fracture and reinvention. He sat back, heart pounding on the edge of a precipice. The truth would either destroy him or save him, depending on the lens through which he chose to see it. To surrender meant losing everything he thought he knew, his past, his self, the fragile illusion of control. But to resist was to remain trapped, caught in an endless loop of half-remembered nightmares and unanswered questions. In that moment of unbearable clarity, Chad faced a choice that felt like a chasm with no bridge: to embrace the unknown and walk into the darkness willingly, or retreat into the comfort of ignorance and slowly dissolve into the shadows of forgotten dreams. His hand trembled as he reached for the notebook, the one that had arrived unbidden, filled with cryptic writings and warnings. The last page bore a single line scrawled in ink faded by time. "Only by facing the abyss can we discover the light we never knew existed." And there it was, the terrifying awakening. The story was not a mystery to be solved, but a riddle to be lived, a path winding through fear, memory, and the eternal question of what it means to truly be human. Chad's eyes closed, and for a moment, the walls of his reality crumbled. He felt as if he was waking from a dream he had been trapped in his whole life, a dream crafted by forces he could barely comprehend, yet shaped by every secret he had ever buried deep inside. He understood then that some truths don't arrive, wrapped in answers. They come as questions, unending, uncomfortable, alive. They demand more than understanding. They demand courage. And as the screen fades to black, the final words linger, a haunting echo that pulls you back into the depths of the story, long after the lights have dimmed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.